name is Jessica Soto, and I will be focusing on the criminalization of immigrants, more specifically, immigration detention centers. Let's start by taking a look at immigration today. In Trump's budget proposal for 2018, he requests a budget increase of $1.2 billion for ICE. All of this money will go towards funding more detention beds. This would mean an increase of 10,000 beds from our current amount of 38,000 to 48,000. In anticipation of this growth, ICE plans to open new detention centers. They've been considering areas around large cities such as Detroit, Chicago, Salt Lake City, and St. Paul, Minnesota. These location choices are especially worrisome to many immigration activists because it shows this administration's desire to target long-term residents, asylum seekers, and dreamers. So far this year, there's been a 43% increase in arrests by ICE. A whopping 41,000 people were arrested in the first 100 days of the Trump presidency. However, deportations themselves have gone down. This means that more people are being held for longer periods of time. It's important to explore not only why there are so many individuals in immigration detention, but more importantly, how they are treated while they're detained. According to Loleria Praley, the Director of Immigration Policy and Campaigns at the ACLU, the ICE detention system is already notorious for inhumane and abusive conditions, as well as lack of transparency and accountability. The detention process. One of the reasons that so many people are in detention centers today is because there's a congressional mandate that requires 34,000 beds to be filled each night. ICE is the only agency that operates this way. Once they have been detained, it's a very long process for individuals to get out of. Currently, we have a backlog of over 500,000 cases. Each case takes about 2 years to close on average. However, despite these large numbers, there are only about 300 judges in the entire immigration court system. The lack of sufficient judges has led several of them to be relocated to border cities where ICE arrests are high. This has further exacerbated the backlog of cases in their own home state. It's important to note that entering the country illegally is a civil offense, not a criminal one. One might think that immigration being a lesser offense than something like violent crime would help an individual's situation. However, the opposite is true. Those in immigration detention are not afforded the same rights as criminal defendants. For one, ICE can appeal the judge's decision to close a case, and the detained individual will remain in detention throughout the entire appeal process. More importantly, the detained individual has no right to an attorney, which brings us to immigration lawyers. Because they have no right to an attorney, individuals must either pay for one, which is a large financial burden, or find one who can work for free. There are several nonprofits that provide legal services, but the number of immigrants needing assistance greatly outweighs the resources available to them. Immigration law is extremely complex. However, it has the highest percentage of individuals representing themselves. This is a prime example of the injustice built into our immigration system. These individuals are basically set up to fail. 20% of individuals with lawyers won their cases, while only 3% of individuals without lawyers were able to win. Moreover, individuals with lawyers are 4 times more likely to be released on bond, are 11 times more likely to seek asylum or relief from deportation, and are 2 times more likely to be successful when seeking this relief. In spite of this, over 2/3 of those detained in San Francisco Immigration Court did not have access to legal counsel. Many of those who have been detained actually report opting for deportation because they feel they have no chance of winning. Detention centers. They're often in remote areas, making it very difficult for family to visit the detained individual. Detention centers are either privately owned or are just county jails. County jails were never meant for long-term stays, but because of the backlog of cases, there are reports of individuals who have spent upwards of 3 years in them. According to Anu Prasad, an attorney, there are clients who spend years in places like Yuba County, where they are on 23-hour lockdown. Recently, the Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security released a report that detailed malpractice, and inhumane treatment that occurs in detention centers. Many detainees are housed incorrectly based on their criminal history, meaning that someone held solely for immigration offenses could be sharing a cell with a more serious violent offender. All detainees at certain locations are strip searched, which is a breach in protocol. Many officers within detention centers don't use the language services available to them to facilitate communication with detainees. This means if a detainee does not speak English, they often have no idea what's going on. Moreover, many individuals were deterred from filing grievances, and when grievances were filed, there was often no documentation of resolution. Some facilities misused their ability to segregate detainees. Stated in the report, staff did not always treat detainees respectfully and professionally, and they observed potentially unsafe and unhealthy conditions. Food in detention centers. The same Inspector General report stated that they found expired, moldy, and spoiled foods inside of detention facilities. Many facilities were found to have inadequate food supplies. There were even reports of food being infested with worms and flies. One woman states that she would often need to skip one or several meals because they were inedible, and she and her child lost a considerable amount of weight as a result. Healthcare in detention centers. There were reports of poor conditions in detention center bathrooms. Many detainees were provided with insufficient hygiene supplies, and they reported long waits for medical care. There have been many deaths within detention centers linked to subpar care. One such case is Raúl Ernesto Morales Ramos. He passed away in April of 2015. He first entered a detention facility in 2011. This particular facility was operated by Geo Group, a private company who has a long-standing relationship with ICE. 2 independent reports found that Raúl likely started showing symptoms of cancer in 2013, but he was not properly diagnosed until 2 years later, just a month before his death. In February, before he passed, he even submitted a grievance where he stated, "To whoever receives this, I'm letting you know that I'm very sick and they don't want to care for me. The nurse only gave me ibuprofen and that only alleviates me for a few hours. Let me know if you can help me." These reports revealed systemic indifference to his suffering and systemic failures in the immigration detention healthcare system, which continues to happen both in private and public detention facilities. Just last year, reports were released detailing the investigation into the deaths of 18 detainees from 2011 to 2015. These reports also detailed subpar medical care. The Human Rights Watch has concluded that this subpar care was the cause of death for at least 7 of the 18 detainees who passed away. They also reported misuse of isolation for individuals with mental illness and inadequate mental health care and treatment. Criminalization of immigrants. Our immigration system sets immigrants up to fail. They don't have the same rights as criminal defendants, and their lack of right to a lawyer makes it very difficult for them to win their case. Our detention process as a whole is inhumane and cruel. Not only is their fight long, but their living conditions within detention centers are deplorable. The United States was built by immigrants, but our current system shows that we have turned away from this ideal. Rather than praising immigrants today, we criminalize them. Here are my sources. Thank you for listening.